What up? What up? What up? What up? So look, I guess this is rant. Rant? I don't know if it's rant. Just been having some thoughts lately, mostly based on rap news. Um, so I guess part of it is from some of the discourse around the Kendrick and Drake stuff, where all of that has left the state of the rap industry. It is where things seem to be in terms of the business of rap music. There's a lot being said about how artists, even the big ones, aren't making a bunch of money, if any, from actual music these days. Um, some of the big record labels. I know Atlantic just laid a bunch of people off, including a lot of people who've been working on the rap side of the industry for a long time. Um, and then, of course, all of the Diddy stuff. And I have so many levels of feelings about the Diddy stuff. Um, so much. I have this sort of general fascination with this idea that like people in power and what power does to people, how it changes people, and how institutions seem to foster um, this sort of dynamic between people in power um, and the people around them. People trying to come up in the institution, how the institutions sort of protect people from facing the consequences of their actions in lots of ways, and and how that sort of encourages people to just keep doubling down on like the worst parts of themselves until it either spills over and they get caught, or we never even fucking hear about it in a lot of cases. And then people just have their lives destroyed for years, um, and the institution just keeps on protecting them. But one of the main feelings that I've been having is just like this feeling of like almost surprised that people are surprised. I think that's kind of where my brain and my heart keeps going. And it's not so much in like a we've been knowing or I told you so kind of way. It's more in the way of like if you look at Diddy for instance, just take him for instance. Like there have been people within rap music, and I mean like on wax, on records, attempting to have conversations about that man since the mid 90s. And so the feeling that I think I'm having is less from a place of we told you so, but more of a place of like it's really frustrating what it takes to get people to listen when people are trying to have these difficult conversations. Like that's sort of the place where I feel like I've landed. Um, because again, like if you look at the rap news, right, you see a lot of people saying, "Oh, hip hop is over, hip hop is gone, hip hop is cooked, hip hop is dead." And again, that's another conversation that I feel like people within rap music in certain corners of it have been trying to have since the 90s, like trying to have verbally, trying to have on record. And I feel like, yeah, the conversation that we were trying to have in the 90s, it was still in a time when whatever it was that we think hip hop is that's like lost, um, I feel like at that time, it still maybe could have been saved. And I've thought a lot about what it is that I think that we were trying to preserve. And I say we, I was a teenager. I was learning about the world while also seeing this divide happen and seeing like the thing that attracted me to hip hop, um, the sort of expression, the there was an empowerment in hip hop, a very like individualistic and unique empowerment, like that and it wasn't about, because in a lot of situations I was in life, your power was defined by how much money you had. Your power was defined by what, like what you dressed like, what you talked like. Your power was defined by how many people were with you, physical power. There was an empowerment in hip hop that attracted me when I learned about like the performing arts of hip hop on the ground level. So like when it was like, yeah, even you can rap, even you can break dance, even you can do graffiti. And if you put in the time or have any of the talent to get good at it and develop your skills, then there was just a self-empowerment in the meritocracy of it. And I think that merit always sort of flew in the face of the capitalistic element of our society, that things seem to have to be in line with to reach mass market status. And I feel like that was the battleground that we were watching play out in the 90s, where like some people were trying to have this conversation about like, hey, there's some essential values here in this thing that have sort of always been there. If you look at like, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5, Public Enemy, Karis 1, like there's this sort of anti-establishment, self-empowerment energy in this thing that if this culture goes a certain way, that'll be gone. And people were trying to have that conversation and trying to work out a space where there could maybe be some balance. And mind you, nobody is perfect on either side of this, right? Like if you look at any of the people I just named, they made their own mistakes. They're all human beings. So it's not like I'm trying to say it was good, bad, right, wrong, that sort of thing. What I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to express is this feeling that we were trying to have a conversation about the balance. Because I think on the other side of that conversation, given that very little action was taken, nothing was done. In fact, more people started to embrace the capitalistic side. Like to me, that's always been where this thing tipped. And I think it really, to me, it always goes to like Dr. Dre's The Chronic album, where like Dr. Dre is coming from NWA, this group that had this very anti-establishment stripe to them. They were gangster. They did a lot of indulgence, right? There was some get money in them. There were some of the worse or more negative values of American culture that were in that group. Like, mind you, they weren't pure Public Enemy. They weren't pure political, but they had that awareness and they had this sort of self-empowerment thing in them, right? Well, fuck the police and all of that. They were fighting for something, even though they were also partying or whatever, right? But when you get to Dr. Dre's The Chronic, all of that is left to the side. All of the anti-establishment is left to the side. What becomes centered, feeling good, indulging, smoking weed, drinking, partying, hustling, getting money. And I think that becomes this interesting crossroads for hip hop because like consumption, financial ambition, like those are ideas that are really central to like the capitalistic engine that runs this society. So I feel like once hip hop started to fully embrace that and leave the anti-establishment behind, it allowed itself to resonate with more people in the society. It allowed it to get bigger. And like you had so I think from that pivot, right? The culture was starting to go somewhere where people who were thinking about these things were trying to have a conversation about, hey, that's cool, y'all are getting money, but do you want to go all the way there? Because if you go all the way there, then what happens to these other values? And so you had the Dr. Dre's, the Diddy's, Leor Cohen's, Jermaine Dupri's. They were trying to take it to this place that was not inherently bad, but it's a dangerous place. Because once you're trying to make a product that needs to resonate with a lot of people and needs to be accessible to a lot of people, you can't do that without institutional buy-in. You cannot make a mass market product that needs to be accessible to everyone without buy-in from the largest capitalistic institutions that we have. And once you're married to that, then you can't be anti-establishment anymore. That's why if you fast forward to now, after it has taken that road and has fully embraced those capitalistic attitudes and now does resonate with a lot more people. Like I remember the first time I heard that song, Hustling from Rick Ross. And I was like, okay, it's just another one of those songs, right? Like, one of them money goblin, money getting motivational songs that came out of hip hop at that particular time. And I didn't think much of it. But then that song got really huge and it occurred to me like, oh, right. An idea like every day I'm hustling. You don't have to just be in hip hop for that to resonate with you. You could be a stockbroker. You could be a farmer. Any walk of life, because again, right? Like that's part of our capitalistic attitude is to just work. Get it. So like, oh, that resonates with people in all different walks of life. But it's like now that that's fully taken root, right? And that is now how hip hop is defined, because that's the other thing, right? Like hip hop as a thing has always been, I can't say it's always been, but at some point it became defined by what rap music is doing. Hip hop became defined by what just this one part of it is doing. That became the public facing leading edge of what this particular subculture meant. And the definition of what rap music is has always been this sort of negotiation between the industry, the artist, and the consumer. The consumer is making choices based on what they're wanting to hear. The artist is making choices based on what they want to express and what they can sell and make a living off of. And the industry, of course, is just trying to capitalize on whatever people are consuming at that time. It's always seeking to make more of that available. So now we're at a place where I think if you look at on the grand scale, in a macro sense, the negotiation between the creators, the consumers, and the industry, rap music is mostly defined by capitalism, excess, partying, escapism. So now we're in that. This is I think hegemony is the word. We're just like, things are kind of what people believe they are to some degree. I'm not sure if that's the right word for that. But in this context, right? That's why a Public Enemy would look crazy in this context. It wouldn't do anything. Like you couldn't have that now because we know we have completely left that part of it behind. But that's the conversation we were trying to have. So now the most counterculture voice in the mainstream of hip hop is probably a Kendrick, who from far away doesn't look that different. But up close, the messaging obviously is different enough to set him apart. But that's a lot to put on one person. And even and if you're somebody like me, if you look at a Kendrick and a J. Cole, from this is just Mike Eagle. This is Michael Eagle talking. From my perspective, they don't even do enough to get that distinction. To me, they are not distinct enough. To me, it's too close. It's not counter culture enough at all. But again, these are the conversations that we were trying to have, and what ends up frustrating me when I look at all of this is that my elders, when I was 15, the J. Rules, the KRS Ones, they were trying to have these conversations. They took the resources that they were getting from major labels to try to air some of this stuff out. And it's like, yeah, now we're at where we're at because nobody really listened. And I think, again, that's why it also makes me think about Diddy too. Like, everybody's up in arms about it now. And it's like I've been part of this hip hop culture for 30 plus years now. And it's like, who is surprised by any of this that's been paying attention? But I guess that's the thing. Most people haven't. And it's like, when people scream about things from the rooftops, like people have within this culture, about all sorts of things, like, what does it take to get people to actually listen? Like, that's the part that I find myself continually frustrated with. Because even in some of the fervor around the Diddy stuff now, it's like, okay, I'm seeing people freak out over pictures from an all-white party where, like, it's a Tribe Called Quest and Kim Kardashian. I don't think that's the same party where they brought out the baby oil bottles, like the one where there's all these giant public stars and paparazzi and professional cameraman. Like, I don't think that's the one. And we're busy looking for that because people are trying to figure out, okay, who's Diddy gonna take down with him? Like, they were worried about who Epstein was gonna take down with him, because obviously he's gonna rat out all of these powerful people and it's like, okay, that's one step closer to having a conversation about all of this, but I still feel like it's aimed the wrong way. Because, like, yeah, we might find out some of the people they were partying with. We might not find out some of the people they were partying with. But I think the conversation to be had within that, right? And it's something I was saying earlier. We were playing coffee. We were having coffee. Something around the idea of, like, horny came up. And that's something that I've been seeing in all of this. It's like there's we need to have more real conversations about, like, what it is people want, what it is people do, all of that. That's the conversation. These are the new conversations we need to be having. Me and Sailor Sorry have talked about this quite a bit. Like, there's a shame in people's full spectrum of sexuality that causes a lot of the stuff to be done in secret. And once that gets mixed in with all these power dynamics, people's lives get ruined in this. And it's like, yeah, we're looking for, people are, like, up in arms looking for the co-conspirators. You may find some, you may not find some. But who you won't find is the victims. And that's very frustrating. We know as a society, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. We know these things. So what are we doing to protect the vulnerable populations from people in power? What are we doing to address the trauma that people have endured being exposed to people in power, since we know that power corrupts? We know it. That part's never surprising. But if you're talking about somebody who's been building up the institutional cover to engage in all of this bad behavior for 15, 20, 30 years, how many victims is that? Sex workers taken across state lines, drugged and IV'd. And what are we doing to protect vulnerable populations from people in power if we know that power corrupts? Like, we have to have a talk about power. We have to have a talk about, like, does everybody need power? Does power need to come with like observation? Because we give this to people. We make choices. So remember, like, part of this is consumer choice. We give money to institutions, and it's not just the entertainment industry. It's Hollywood, it's churches, it's government. We have these institutions where inside of them people have power, and we know that in many cases power encourages people to become bad actors. So now I think the conversation is, what do we do about that? Something needs to be in place there. Like, or else we should just admit that we don't give a shit. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe just as a society, we're just so far gone right now that we no longer have empathy. Because a lot of times that's what it seems like. I mean, oh man, I remember it was around the time when Mike Brown got killed. And I think that was the inciting incident for people to start saying Black Lives Matter. And what a horrible thing to have to say. You have to say that because you've been in a society where you feel like the opposite is true. That's the only reason you would ever say Black Lives Matter, is because something in society is happening to make you feel like they don't. And and mind you, again, in a capitalistic society, every commercial you see makes you feel like your life matters. All the advertising makes you feel like your happiness is the penultimate thing in this universe, and you better pay top dollar to make sure that you're happy because that's what you deserve. Like, because the money doesn't differentiate. So to come up in a society where you feel like you matter, but then to be faced with an institution in that society that tells you over and over again that you don't, what do you do with that? We were talking in the Discord about Marcellus Williams. And I was saying, like, when I read stuff like that, like, it gives me this rage where I literally do not know what to do with it. Because it stacks up like evidence of this thing in society that makes me feel less than. It makes people who look like me feel less than. It makes me feel like I have to have this double consciousness that nobody teaches you within the institution. It is dehumanizing. But it's very clear that it exists. And minorities feel this way. Women feel this way. Anybody who's not, born in a default power position, and even some that do, depending on different categories that they might fall in, sexuality. There's so many categories. There's so many expressions of life that could leave you feeling subhuman in this society, and it creates a rage. And what do you do with it? So I think the answer, not the answer, but an answer, a first step answer for all of this for me is that we need to talk about shit. Like, we need to have real ass conversations about shit. And again, like, I sit in a place within hip hop where conversations about the soul of hip hop, the vitality of hip hop, the character of a Diddy, like, people have been trying to talk about this for 30 years. So I'm left with this question of, like, what do you have to do to get people to listen? And I feel like that's what I'm going to be chewing on for the months to come. Like and subscribe, homie, friend. It's free. Stop playing.